Um,
ready for that.
Oh, and we're live to everybody. Everybody can see this. I'm kidding. So, yeah, Anna, welcome to Hazy Not Crazy.
yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
First,
Hey,
first po
welcome. Woohoo.
Yeah, we're excited. I guess we got to talk some smack first because Shannon knows I went to the Ohio University, and I hear you went to
Oh,
some small college up north called Ohio State University. Is that right?
yeah, it's pretty small. Not many people have heard of it.
Yeah.
We're and Buckeyes, they're intimidating, poisonous nuts. It's a whole thing.
Uh-huh.
But I won't hold it against you.
Go. Yeah, me neither. Me neither.
My younger brother went to Michigan, so I've had to get used to a
Oh
little
God.
competition. Yeah. My
Well,
parents, I
my
think, take it more seriously than we do. They've got the
Mm.
house divided flags, house divided t-shirts, the
Isn't
whole
that
thing.
funny?
Yeah.
Where did your parents go to college?
They went to Iowa State and Virginia Tech. So
Oh, okay.
we
Where are
were
you from originally?
originally from Connecticut. I moved to Colorado when I was about 11. We really had no ties to Ohio State or Michigan.
Oh,
My brother's just really smart. So, of course, he went to Michigan. He has that over me. But I ended up going to Ohio State purely because of volleyball.
okay.
Embarrassingly enough, with it being the biggest school in the country, I really hadn't heard of it until the coaches started talking to me for
That's so
volleyball. But
funny.
yeah, yeah,
Well, we got some great
Wow.
pictures. Let's just cut to the chase. D1 athlete, Anna,
Anna, yep,
Anna, yeah.
yeah,
Boom. There she is.
Oh, I
What, so
like
what
that.
position did you play? You're blocking some shots here, it looks like.
yeah. I was a middle blocker, and so pretty much my only talent is the fact that I've got abnormally long arms and I'm almost 6'3". So and you can see big old paddles of hands. But
You're on the
I
right,
actually,
right? You're on the right?
yep, yeah, that's me,
Okay.
number 18. And yeah, I guess this is the first time I've ever had brown hair, so I'm blonde in most of these photos. But
Got it.
uh,
Y-
yeah,
You're almost 6'3", Anna.
yeah.
That's
So
intense. That's
I
great.
think
My
roster
husband is
height, they
six
probably have
seven.
me. Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, we're a big family, but I'm not 6'3". So
Yeah,
So
we're
you
we're
my
would
big
block that.
people in my family. Big meaning, tall.
oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
And there you are getting ready.
oh
So,
yeah,
God, you guys, it looks like there's a lot of people there. Were your games like sold out usually?
for
And
sure.
Well, we were in St. John Arena, which is kind of the historical basketball
mm,
arena at Ohio
Yeah.
State. So it was much bigger than the volleyball crowds we got. I think our biggest crowd was about 5,000 for a Michigan game. And yeah,
Wow.
we had a really great student section.
mm.
So much
I blew out
fun.
my knee, and so I ended up hanging out at the end of the bench close to our student section half the time.
Oh man.
But it was,
Is it
yeah,
is
I mean,
this the
interesting.
is this you get a point shot right here?
Yeah, I think I've been on national television saying some things that would not make my parents proud. In celebration, dropping a couple F bombs, but yeah, so that was probably right after Big Block. I That was sort of where my epilepsy story started, actually, as I was
Okay.
signed my life away to move across the country a couple months before I had my first seizure. And of course, as you guys know, you have one seizure and then they kind of just put you on watch to see if you have another and if it's actually
Sure.
epilepsy. Um, and so going from Colorado to Ohio, not knowing anyone, it was definitely a learning curve. And but it's still the best thing that ever happened to me. I think having to go out, and it took a while. I'm still learning about my epilepsy. As you guys are aware, I'm sure things change constantly, but it was good for me to get out and experience everything on my own. It's just I had made that decision well before I knew what was coming with my uh, future
Wow.
disability.
What was the
Sure.
biggest challenge during that learning curve? Because like you said, you go from Colorado to all of a sudden you're playing Division One volleyball. Um, it seems like quite an adjustment. What would you say the biggest challenge during that learning curve was?
I think just not knowing anything about my epilepsy. If I was going to get one point across in this podcast, it would be to ask your neuros as many questions as possible, do a lot more research, go down some Reddit rabbit holes, uh, because I pretty much went in blind. I didn't know what my biggest triggers were. I didn't know anything about how my seizures. I still have never actually seen myself have a seizure, obviously. Um, my loved ones are a little hesitant to try to just whip out a video camera while I'm seizing, but um, weird stuff was happening. Like the first one I had in public, I was at our student mess hall, and I was with my teammates. One of my teammates like threw a table across the room. They called the paramedics, which as epileptics we know we don't really want anyone calling 911 if it's a normal seizure because there's not much they can do for you at the
Yeah.
hospital. And then I went down to the mess hall though a couple days later, and this man comes up to me and he like holds my hand, and he's just very kind in his face and kind of like he knows me and I have no idea who he is. Uh, and he's like, "How are you doing? How are you feeling?" Um, and it turns out he was working at the mess hall and his daughter has epilepsy. So of course I blacked it all out. But
Mm.
the first experience of like in public, someone knowing you from helping you, and I was like, I'm fine. I'm just here to get lunch. And then he has so much experience with it that he was like, I'm sorry, you probably don't remember me, and kind of explained. Um, but that was a bizarre experience to just be like, I don't know why this person's talking to me. It was,
Wow.
I think, my third seizure ever. Um, and so those types of learning curves. And then, of course, in dorms, you're sharing a room. I have such a hard time sleeping as it is. And, my teammates aren't trying to breathe while they're sleeping, but I can just hear them breathing, and I'm having a hard time getting rest. And sleep, it turns out, lack of sleep is my biggest trigger, like hands down.
Mhm.
In college is pretty much based around not getting enough sleep. And that was tough.
Oh, totally.
How so you were 18-ish. Is that what?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that you and Nathan sounds like have a very similar story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
I was right
what was
there before going to college. Yeah.
going to
Mhm.
college? Yeah. And you really just kind of answered one of our questions that we like to ask everybody is, all right, if there's one thing you can tell people, what's it going to be? And we love that question. Um, but and that's kind of the one thing that Nathan and I say is, I, between us, we've got like almost 70 years of, seizure experience
Yeah.
because I was diagnosed as I was born with it. It's genetic in my
Okay.
family. But so if you could just tell everybody before we move on, what's your specific diagnosis and what medication you're
Yeah.
taking.
So they originally diagnosed me with JME, um, which is juvenile.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I'm blanking on the rest of that, but
Myotonic
Myoclonic,
epilepsy.
juvenile
myoclonic.
myoclonic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys
Yeah,
know.
you're talking to
Um,
your friends here.
yeah.
We're in the club.
Uh, and of course, they tried to figure out like if I had been having absence seizures when I was like
Sure,
growing up and everything. The
sure.
classic question: Do you guys ever wake up with the toothbrushes on the floor? You don't know how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
A lot of kids get diagnosed with like ADHD, which actually I got diagnosed with last month as a 30-year-old, which was been interesting. But
Huh.
so I have tonic-clonic seizures. I'm on lamotrigine, which is the generic Lamictal,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's been interesting because that was another part of my journey too. Is no one told me that lamotrigine was also an SSRI used for bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
I think emotionally, you're going from being a teenager into college, and I just had a lot of kind of like apathy. I just wasn't a super emotional person, and to find out like 8 years later that I was on a medication for bipolar disorder when I don't have bipolar disorder, it was like kind of figuring out who I am all over again when I
Whoa.
turned 28. Um, so I guess it actually was a decade that I was on it for that. I met someone in California I was like, oh yeah, I'm on that for bipolar disorder. And I was just kind of like, what? um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I have
Sounds like a
complex
California
seizures.
conversation.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. A lot more people open about their mental health in California, and just
for
in the
sure.
last couple of years too. Which is why talking about it has become really important to me too. I didn't like talking about it. I think we all go through that experience. Um, but back to the original question, I've always had grand mal tonic-clonic seizures. I had one on camera on a work call that they've just like figured out was tonic-clonic, but I wasn't fully on the ground seizing. I was like, my arms were shaking and I was just walking repeatedly into the base of my bed because my desk setup was in my bedroom at the time during COVID. And I was getting a bunch of pings from people on the call that were like, hey, your camera's on. Like I don't remember logging into the phone call.
Oh
Um,
my
it,
gosh.
Whoa.
yeah, it was crazy. And fortunately, like my work bestie was on the call. She kind of told everyone, I think Anna's having a seizure. By the time I kind of came out of it, I had a bunch of text messages to her that were like drunk gibberish, and one word was like seizure. I think like all this weird
Wow.
jarbled mess. Um, and that was pretty hard to have had that happen professionally on camera.
Sure.
But so that was my one thing that was weird. It wasn't like your classic complete loss of control on the ground, shaking. Um, and it worked out. Now I'm just rambling in different directions, but it worked out to be kind of a blessing in disguise because there was some kind of executive level leadership on the call, and during COVID they wanted all of us to come back to the office, and I had come to Colorado to originally temporarily just to kind of get some ski season in, and then I met my now fiance. Um, and they called me the next day, so they talked to HR and said, we want you to stay by your doctors, by your family and loved ones. Um, and I got approved for full-time remote work even after COVID. So some of that odd stuff happens. It seems really embarrassing at first, and then it worked out for me to kind of live my safest life, to stay with my fiance. California had taken my license, so I was taking the bus to work and walking 2 miles to the bus stop every day for a while, and that was pre-COVID. And so some of those hardships now I don't have to worry about because I haven't been driving for about 2 years now.
So where are you now?
I'm just outside of Denver. We bought a
Okay.
house in August in Arvada for anyone that knows Colorado. But yeah, about 15 minutes outside of downtown.
I
Great.
was just
Congratulations.
gonna ask how you handle that. That's a really important topic about handling if you do have a seizure at work in the professional environment. I was just gonna ask how that played out, but that's incredible that
Yeah.
they approved remote work and then you got to be closer to your doctors and your fiance there. That's super cool. So just you and the Illuminati and your husband out there in Colorado, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everyone's seen the airport.
That blue
Um,
horse, yes. Do you have any
it's
intel on
crazy.
That's
that? That thing is
You're
I
the first
incredibly
person I've
creepy.
ever talked to that's had a seizure, like on a, on a conference call, like, on a
mm,
Yeah.
COVID related Zoom or whatever we're doing
yeah.
right now.
Well,
People
and
have
I've
definitely had them
since
at
had
work, but
more. Yeah.
sure. Oh, you have.
hmm so actually, that now that we're on this platform, another really important thing is shout out to Jared Muscat, which you guys know, you're
Yep.
friends and you've
Yeah.
had on the podcast. He did a this thing called the coffee chat that Patagonia
Yeah.
does at work, and it was on his epilepsy, his incredible story of brain surgery and surfing. And that I didn't like talking about it with work. It feels like one of those things that could be looked at as a obviously it's a disability, but as something that can interrupt your work, maybe hinder your success. But like his story inspired me to talk more at work, and thank goodness I had because I then had some coworkers that knew what was going on in that phone call, um,
Wow.
to kind of gain an understanding that we actually have legal rights as disabled Americans, um, for accommodations and everything is super empowering when previously it felt really embarrassing. Um, and then now I've had some on my phone calls, and since I've been able to talk about it, my coworkers know, like, as soon as I start kind of doing this and not answering and just blasting off, they now all, I've made sure they all have my fiance's contact because he works from home in the next room. Um, they've called him. He can hear me, bang and go down. Um, and that's been super freeing to have people that are like, we get it. I mean, the guy that works for me, he even has called IT and gotten my out of office set up for me, just so I don't have to worry
Oh.
about it. He's a phenomenal human. And my team is really understanding. And also, even just to be able to say, like, hey, I had a seizure. Um, Feel free to send me those emails that are like, hey, just following up on this, which I think a lot of people professionally sometimes can see as a bit nagging or whatever else. And I've been able to talk to everyone and say, that's helpful to me. If I'm ever, like, if I haven't responded to your email and I maybe had like, I just had a seizure Friday actually. And yeah, it's incredibly freeing professionally just to be very open about it. And I'm fortunate enough to work for a company that has fully supported me.
Mm.
I think that's amazing. You're kind of we Nathan and I we're on the same cycle for seizures. We're like cycle sisters,
Your
and
cycle
you're right in
system.
there. I had a seizure,
Oh,
one or two, on last Monday or Tuesday, and it's so
Mm-hmm.
funny because I don't even remember this. This is the part that's a little like, oh my gosh. I sent in payroll um, to our finance committee, and then I resent it today because I don't remember sending it. I'm like, she's like,
Yep.
no, you sent them. I'm like, oh my gosh. So thankfully she's super on it, but it's kind of what you're saying. It's like, and
Mm-hmm.
and we work. I mean, Hazy Not Crazy is not my full-time job, but where I work is also it's a epilepsy related nonprofit, but that's never really happened to me before, so kind of what you're saying, it's like, huh, that's very interesting, that that's
Yeah.
a thing and it happens, and it happened to Nathan just like the week before, and so here we all are
Yeah.
on our same little
cycle
cycle
sisters.
taking,
Woo.
I know,
Oh
cycle
yeah.
sisters, woo woo. But I take Lamictal too, Nathan, and I also take Depakote, but, I get it. I'm curious, and Jared, he said something, and I thought this was so amazing because so many people, when they have epilepsy and seizures, they're depressed. It's just a thing, like, they're really sad, for lack of a better word, about their situation in life and how
Mm-hmm.
they feel. Maybe they're on a swim team and they can't swim anymore, or things of that nature. And what Jared said was, his my doctor told me I can't surf anymore, and I told my doctor, if you take my surfing, you take my soul, and my soul is more important to me. And I just thought that was really a great thing to say. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like what you're saying too. It's like it's important to figure out the things that are important, and then figure out
Mm-hmm.
from there, like, how can we do this? I'm not
Yeah.
gonna just stop snowboarding because
That's me.
right. I have epilepsy. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I appreciate you saying that. And then my last real quick question is, do you take Adderall or anything for your ADHD, or
So yeah, figuring that out right now. The other medication I'm on too is clobazam, which,
okay.
so you brought up depression. I just, I think a lot of us epileptics, we survive. We get by with, especially kind of the emotional hardships of it. And I started going to therapy. The last 2 years, I've had way more seizures. I'm starting to link the fact that I've definitely struggled with depression. Um, I've started having panic attacks and different things. And I talked to one of my neuros, and that's when I got prescribed clobazam, because it's also a benzo that people will take for anxiety short term, but you can take it long term for epilepsy. It's helped with my sleep, with my anxiety, with the depression, and that's been huge for me. And then the ADHD piece. So I'm also, when I got all my testing done for my epilepsy at 18, they found that I have a bit of a heart issue. And so my cardiologist or my neurologist has said that there's no concerns on his end for me getting on some sort of medication for the ADHD, but he wants me to check in with my cardiologist. It's called long QT. I'm on the very fringe of it. It's basically like an irregular heartbeat. Like when I had knee and shoulder surgeries, I kept setting the heart monitors off, like I was flatlining, but it's just because my heartbeat's irregular. Um, the nurses were like, we want to unplug this machine because you don't actually have a 39 beats per minute resting heart rate. Like I'm not Neil or Lance Armstrong, but yeah, so there's a couple complications. Of course, epilepsy is just one of the many things.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, hopefully I'll be getting on. My therapist wants me to get on some sort of, at least try out Adderall,
Sure.
because again, that also contributes to the anxiety piece of things.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah,
And a lot of
yeah.
people, like you said, with epilepsy suffer from ADHD. So it's a
Yeah, and it gets kind of
beast.
passed over with everything
For
else.
sure.
I did just fine in school, so that was never anything that got called out for me. But yeah, the anxiety is a huge issue. Depression's tough. Um, I I feel like I've done a ton of learning in the last 2 years while my seizures have been getting worse. Um, I'm now noticing, talk about cycle sisters, I'm noticing that my last couple of seizures have happened the day before my period,
No,
which turns
sure.
out is actually a type of
Is a
epilepsy.
yep.
That's
And
catamenial epilepsy. Yeah.
yeah,
Catamenial. Yeah.
yeah. And my, not to be totally TMI, but my period cycle wasn't regular for a long time. So I've never tied the two together. And
Mine
that's
either.
something, yeah. So now I'm going to bring that up to my neuro next time I see him. I
Sure.
don't know if that'll change any of my medication or anything, but it is nice for me now to be aware of
Sure.
my times when that time of the month's coming up. Because that
Yep.
was what happened Friday. I didn't have, I slept fine. I didn't have my normal like triggers, but I ended up having a seizure on the ski lift Friday when we were in
No,
Aspen.
I've done
And
that.
Jeez.
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't
So
fall off.
it's,
Did you fall off?
no,
Yeah.
that was another thing too. Is like I was a dumbass about, excuse my
On
pardon
this.
my French, but it just
It's okay.
absolutely
We're unfiltered.
irresponsible.
So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Go
you're
for it.
fine.
yeah.
You're fine.
When I was younger, I didn't want to ask people to put the bar down on the ski lift. I didn't want to be like, "Hey, I'm an epileptic. We have to put the bar down." Because some people don't like doing that. But
What
now I
does it
just
have to
have.
do with epilepsy? I bar up on those. Are you kidding me? Those things are so high.
I know
What?
everyone should be
Was it
doing
like a
it,
cool
but
factor? It's like I don't want to put the bar on
Yeah.
because
I don't know. I think some people are
that's
just more relaxed when
insane.
they don't have to put it
That's
down.
funny.
But
Well, here's
Yeah.
Anna in
I've
the
um,
never had
wild,
one on
right
the
there on top
mountain,
of the
but I've had
mountain.
one
oh
on the
yeah,
lift.
yeah. That was my first one on the lift. I've never had one on the mountain either. This is with
Yeah.
my best friend. She's amazing. She's a nurse, and her name's Alyssa. She's for the longest time, was the only person in my life that could tell when I was gonna have a seizure. She could just kind of see it in my eyes, I guess.
Yeah.
My fiance says the same thing now. Um, and she's great. She really respects my need for, my desire for independence. So
Sure.
when she could like see it in my eyes in the mornings and we would live together, she'd have some sort of excuse that she had to do her makeup or brush her teeth the same time I was showering and all that stuff just to make sure she was right there if anything
Oh,
happened. And like I said, she's a nurse, so she's a pro with helping me recover. And yeah, for the longest time before I met my fiance, she's really the only person I was comfortable around after a seizure. Um, so yeah, shout out to Alyssa Winter. She's the
yeah.
best.
Shout
Ah,
out to her.
love
And then
that, Alyssa.
speaking of support
Hey,
systems,
yeah,
Shannon and
it's
I
awesome.
owe you a very big congratulatory official Hazy Not Crazy on your recent engagement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Woo!
We
Yeah,
got
but
a oh,
That's
flashed it. There
exciting.
you
yeah,
When
go.
was that?
Look at this, Shannon.
that
Here we
was
are on top of the mountain.
yeah,
Is
Aw,
my
that the
two
nurse on
best
the left?
friends.
Yeah, who's
I
tell
love
take us through
was
this
that just
picture.
did that just happen?
Yeah, so it was 2 weeks ago. We were in Leadville,
Oh,
Colorado. I was completely surprised. We went on this tour, kind of this ATV thing, up the mountain, saw some beautiful views, and then we were on the way back down, and um, yeah, he popped the question. So it's really exciting. It's a beautiful thing that, we met through friends of a friend I had at Ohio State whose older brother was friends with my fiance in college in Florida. And it's this weird thing where, like, if I had decided not to go to Ohio State because of my epilepsy, I never would have met the
Mm,
now love of my life.
yeah,
So life takes you down interesting paths, but
sure.
yeah.
and he seems so incredibly
That's
supportive. This is, if you can take us
Hmm.
through, you also sent some really cool pictures.
Oh yeah.
I actually
Please
didn't
don't
notice
make
it.
those the thumbnail, but that was my latest EEG.
So, is he pulling your ponytail?
That's
That's
me
fun.
holding it. So being almost
Oh,
six
that's you. Oh,
three, and I had all the wires. And you guys have had EEGs, I'm sure, but they have all the, like, the wires coming out of the back of your head. And so there was some good Avatar jokes made about
it is like Avatar,
linking up the
right?
machines. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
you
So he
are.
was
And
super
then
supportive. He
that's
was
him
there
with
the whole
your
time.
Avatar ponytail.
Yeah, yeah. He was like, we have to get some pictures with all these wires, and he had
What are you
had all
guys
wrapped
watching in
up.
the background? Is that Brokeback Mountain? What's that say? Live,
Um,
extraordinary.
I
Is
don't
that a
even know what that
Colorado
uh,
is.
screensaver? Is that
Yeah,
yeah, it
because
looks like
that's the computer.
Yellowstone or something.
That's not even the TV in the room. That's just the nurse's computer.
nurse's screensaver?
They
Oh,
might be watching Brokeback Mountain. Who
The,
knows? But
yeah.
yeah, probably Yellowstone if I had to guess.
I know
Yeah,
that's what I was gonna say,
great show.
Yellowstone.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
well, I was just gonna say it's so funny. So my triggers, one of my triggers is hormones, and
Hmm.
I had horrible seizures during my two pregnancies,
Oh
and
wow.
so, and part of the reason, and everything is way more advanced. I mean, my oldest is 16 and then my son is 14. So lots happened. But I was also had to go on Topamax during, because they're like, oh, you can't be on Depakote and blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And Topamax didn't control my seizures. And so I had a lot of seizures. I survived, but I'm here, but I had a lot of seizures. And then after that, we weren't done, so we ended up adopting. And we adopted a little girl from the Congo. And pretty much after that, I didn't have any seizures for like 7 or 8 years.
Wow.
And my next seizure was I had just come down from the mountain from Big Bear, and so we realized that one of the triggers for me is like most likely altitude. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of the one thing that I was like, all right, okay, like I don't have to go to, I don't, I'm not a professional skier or snowboarder. Like that's okay. And if I really
Yeah.
want to, we can go to the Alps or somewhere, where the altitude is very low and just kind of do that. But those were a couple of things. And then, I just had this seizure and it had been, one of the first times in a long time. But um I had a hysterectomy. And so after the hysterectomy, I really wasn't having seizures. So
Wow.
just
Oh.
something to keep
Yeah.
in mind way down the road though, but
Hmm.
um it worked for me
That's
until
really
this
good to know.
past week.
Yeah. Because I think altitude is a thing for me too. It's hard because snowboarding is like my happy place. There's
Sure,
really no
right?
greater high than a good powder day. And now that I'm living back in Colorado, of course, I'm going even more often. But I've definitely had like a disproportionate amount of seizures up in the mountains. And I've it's interesting now that, I mean, literally this past week was the first time I put together that my hormones possibly could be tied to it. And so there's altitude. I also have a gene marker for breast cancer. I don't know if you guys have heard BRCA1, but I have this BARD1 thing that's a little bit lesser known. And I've been thinking about having a mastectomy. We're not sure if we want to have kids. So hysterectomy could be in my future. And if it would help with seizures, that'd be amazing. You know, the other thing that's interesting is my neuros told me that with lamotrigine, I couldn't be on birth control. So I've seen that there's people that go on birth control and their seizures stop as well. But I was essentially kind of misinformed about that. Like the pill does interact with lamotrigine, but other forms of birth control don't. So I've learned so much in like the last 2 years that, no, I've had great neuros, but sometimes they just don't actually have all the information. There's so much unknown about epilepsy. So things like being told at 18 that you can't be on birth control is a whole nother thing for a 19-year-old to figure out. But yeah, and I'm so impressed that you have children. I actually had a bit of an emotional breakdown a couple of weeks ago because we were trying to get a puppy, and my fiance just was mentioning, yeah, we're just gonna have to be really careful about how old we get the puppy because I don't want you losing sleep over taking the dog out every 4 hours, whatever it is that a puppy needs. And I sort of just had an emotional breakdown unexpectedly. I started crying because I was like, we don't know that we want to have kids, but now is this puppy gonna, like, am I not gonna be able to take care of a puppy either, all just because of this? Or is it gonna be entirely put on my fiance to be losing sleep every night while, um, my disability hinders my capability to help foster a relationship with this puppy? And um, so I think one of the sweetest things my fiance's ever said to me was, your responsibilities are my responsibilities. Your burdens are my burdens, and vice versa. And I want this for life. And this was before we got engaged. Um, During
That's a
one of
good
my
one. That's a
episodes.
good one. I'm gonna use that one.
Yeah, yeah, he's been a huge support. And like to hear someone say that, and
That's good.
then, he kind of went into other ways that I support him. Obviously he doesn't have a disability necessarily, but to have someone that loves you and is in your corner, and then also to kind of be like, hey, it's not just you take on my burdens too, makes me feel a little bit better. But yeah, the puppy thing, children, all that stuff, you don't start to think about until you're older and how that impacts those around you. But I mean, that's great that you've successfully had two children. Of course, I feel for you that your seizures
Thanks.
picked up during that too. Um,
Thanks.
yeah,
They're
my first neuro
they're
put me on the Motrigine actually because of that. That
because of, yeah.
apparently you can stay on it if you get pregnant, but I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I do know that there's a lot of doctors now as opposed to when I was pregnant 16 years ago, or 17 years ago, um, that specialize in women with epilepsy, or
Hmm.
epileptologists specifically, which is there's one here in Orange County, and which is great. I mean, this is their specialty, so they have a lot of answers to questions um, that nobody really had all those years ago. So that's great.
Hmm.
But I mean, I will tell you, right, any relationship is give and take, as you know. We in addition to our three children, we have four dogs, and they are not small, they are mastiffs, and they're massive mastiffs, but, my husband maybe changed 3 diapers, and, um but right, I know, I did, and our kids, like, for the at the very, very beginning, we had a night nurse for that reason,
Hmm.
and we hired somebody, or my mom came in for a little bit. By the time we adopted my 3rd one, like, she was sleeping through it was easy.
Hmm.
But I pretty much handled every single thing during the day from 6 o'clock in the morning, until bedtime. And that was how it went. And so, but I
Hmm.
was also able to drive, and I haven't had my license taken away very often, because it's always kind of been, this is, they could attribute my seizures to something. So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah.
Another thing, you sent and shared a picture. I'm so grateful you did. I was actually commenting on some tags with Hazy Not Crazy the other day, and this kid asked like, "Oh, is epilepsy really a disability?" And one thing that's burned in my mind just from working kind of in the advocacy space for so long, meeting people like you, Jared, Shannon, is that I mean, I have like a Rolodex in my head of people after a seizure. And often that is a lot of cuts, a lot of bruises in a like a physical pain, a physical element, in addition to what you can't see, which is just like this mental memory loss, this mental just fog that surrounds where like 48, 72 hours after the seizure, you know, you kind of are trying to figure it out. So I have this picture. I'd love to show it, and if that's okay. If you
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
tell us about the story behind this.
Yeah. So, um, that was one of my seizures in, I think it was in October. I was actually sitting at my desk, and that was one of the ones where my coworkers called my fiance, and I, so I don't know exactly how it happened. I think I banged into my desk. Um, there was blood on my closet frame. Basically, by the time my fiance got in here, I was on the ground, and you can see I hit my nose pretty hard. Um, and he was saving me from choking on my own blood.
Mm,
Um, it was probably one of the goriest seizures I've ever had. And so that stuff is pretty crazy. We've I'm grateful that we've gotten to a point in terms of our communication about it where he supports me, and then we can also talk about how freaky it was for him, which is
Mhm.
important for the people around you. I think you guys have probably all had the experience of coming out of a seizure and you actually have to immediately go into comfort mode for the people around you. I've got friends like bawling and freaking out, and you're like, you're trying to recover while trying to support them. My fiance has been just an absolute saint about um, taking care of my needs, getting me some red meat because I'm always craving that afterwards. But that was a like a pretty serious injury. I still have some marks on my face from it. My nose was bleeding every day for like months. Every morning I'd lean over to wash my face and my nose would start bleeding. Um, Again, back to not being able to drive. It's kind of hard to convince yourself that this actually warrants going to a doctor to get my nose checked out because it's such a pain in the butt to get anywhere. But yeah, that's something too why I think seizure awareness is so important is my fiance understanding that he doesn't, he won't restrict my movements, but he'll make sure that like my airways are there. And he's not sure if I'm choking on my own blood from biting my tongue. He's not sure if it's internal. It's, obviously at the time it was coming down from my nose. Um, and he's trying to protect my head while keeping me from not choking. And that's, it's these injuries that you get. And it's like, I don't know what I would have done if someone wasn't there
Sure.
while I'm,
What did he do?
mm,
So he was protecting underneath my head with his hands, and then he kind of got me sort of on my side so that I was choking the blood out versus choking on it like laying back. Um, and by the time I kind of came to, I was leaned over, just like spitting up, basically. Not to get too gory, but yeah, it was a little disastrous. And I think probably the freakiest one he's seen. Like I said, not knowing where the blood's coming from. So the most important thing for him was making sure that my airways were like open and that I was spitting out and not like having
Sure.
it gargle and choke.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Good for
that's
him.
great.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
great for him. Yes.
Right. That's
Yeah.
actually
Well,
how
yeah.
Cameron Boyce passed away. Was
Yes.
he
Oh.
choked.
Yeah.
But there he had a seizure in the middle of the night, and
Hmm.
um, anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
I
can be.
did. It's great to have somebody around. I had a seizure in my house I used to live in, and ended up like I woke up, there's blood everywhere. All of my clothes were everywhere. The closet doors were disenfranchised from the hinges. And then I walked to the bathroom, the toilet, I ripped the toilet out, just turned into this
It's,
like post-ictal
Monster.
incredible
yeah.
Hulk. But yeah. And then, but the last one, my girlfriend was with me, and she just really was super supportive, like didn't call the ambulance, took me to the hospital after the second one. Um,
Hmm.
and and really thankful for that. So it's really great, and I'm really happy to talk about support systems on this with you, and so articulately
Yeah.
and eloquently about the importance of that. But then also, I wanted to cover your passions. I think we have a photographer among us, Shannon, right
Oh,
here.
wow. I love that.
Hugely amateur. Um,
Yeah. Well, she
yeah.
said right before this, she sent me, this is a first look. What, tell us about this. This is your
Ooh, that's
first picture, right?
Yeah, it's one of my first film photos, and I don't know if on the screen right now I can't quite see the top of it, but it says disability rights or human rights, and it was right around the time that I was acknowledging that epilepsy is a disability. I kind of, you hear disease thrown around, different things, but I think that's an important aspect of it too, understanding the rights you have as a disabled person.
Hmm.
And it's a hard thing to kind of admit that, and I've also seen this campaign about like how disabilities or disabled is not a dirty word, which I think is really cool too. It's a piece of us.
Yeah.
It's a piece of who we are. It doesn't change our capabilities um, in many ways,
ooh,
even
I like
though
that.
we do have other disabilities. But yeah, this is an absolutely crap photo, but it was one of my first film photos I've taken, and I've gotten more into film photography. I sent over some pictures of what I call my little shotgun rider series. It's photos on kind of adventures I've been on with family and friends that are driving me around.
There she is,
um,
shotgun.
I
yeah,
love that.
yeah. So a lot of places in Colorado, some vineyard tours and different things. And yeah, I think occasionally still in the aux cord and trying to DJ the best I can in the car and take photos from the passenger seat has made me feel a little bit better about, again, feeling like a burden that other people have to turn me around. But as my fiance said, when you find friends and loved ones that are willing to share burdens with you, it's pretty life changing. So,
Um, yeah, we've talked about disability and that word a lot on this podcast, and we hope to have him on the podcast here in the next few weeks. But are you familiar with the story of Tony Coelho?
I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah, so he is actually was a man. He grew up with epilepsy, and he wanted to become a priest, but he couldn't because canon law 400 AD cited that anybody with epilepsy can't become a priest. So he became eventually the personal assistant to Hollywood icon Bob Hope, and he would just like
Wow.
was really depressed. And then one day, as he tells the story, Bob Hope was like, "Listen, Tony, I know you feel sorry for yourself. This is great, but what are you going to do about it?" So he ended up getting a law degree and wrote the American with Disabilities Act. And
Wow.
because of that, like you went to Ohio State, like because of that, Shannon was able to graduate. I was able to go to college because that used to be able to be a factor in not admitting somebody to college. Um, so yeah, we'll send you some more information about that too. Really great guy, and we want to talk to him because um, it's empowering. And what I so often find is people that go through this type of adversity, as we all have, is it hardens you, it you know, makes you tougher, and
Hmm.
kind of you're able to really draw from those lessons and hopefully employ those in your personal and professional life. So yeah, no, you just
Yeah.
reminded, this is super cool. I love that you're into photography and stuff. And
I love
Yeah.
that too, and I wanna use one of your I don't know, one of those photos or something, throw on a post. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, please do. Feel free.
All right.
Yeah, I think
Perfect.
that
And then
that
we
was,
saw a picture that where you had screws in was that a shoulder or a knee? Was that from a
that
seizure
was,
or was that not from a seizure?
yeah, that was from a seizure. Actually, I might be able to
Oh,
show my scar a
Okay.
bit. I don't know if you can even see that,
oh
but
yeah.
Oh yeah.
um, yeah, and again, speaking of, you know, voicing what's going on to doctors, it's so hugely important because, and on top of that, also awareness of how to handle someone having a seizure, not restricting their movement is so important because this seizure I was alone in my apartment and we had a couch with a super hard armchair. And so I seized into the couch and my shoulder socket was basically like, I don't know if I'm in the camera, going in and out, like in the opposite direction of how it should. And so my shoulder socket basically just completely cracked in half. Um, and so the huge scars from, they had to go in and it's called Latarjet surgery. They had to saw off part of my chest bone and screw it into my shoulder socket. And that was something where my arm kept like rolling out of place. And then, you go to a doctor and they're like, well, do this with your arms, do this. And it was stable. And, they're just like, nothing's wrong. And I finally got someone to give me an MRI and they're like, oh shit, your entire shoulder socket's just not there. And then my labrum and my rotator cuff, I guess normally the tears are like from here to here. Mine were just like hanging, just completely off the
mm.
circle. Um, and so you have to advocate for yourself. I mean, it took 5 months for someone to actually give me an MRI because, I'd be like curling my hair or blow drying my hair and my arm just rolls out. And at the time, I was still working with the Ohio State volleyball team because I was a senior, but I had had double knee surgery and couldn't play anymore. And so I was trying to help, like, chuck balls on the court, and my arm would just go out. And but every time I did some sort of basic test, they were like, "Well, nothing's wrong. It's not rolling in and out." And then yeah, they go in there and finally take a look at it. So that was a learning curve for me at 21 years old to really push like there's something wrong and like this is not normal, and they go in and they're like, oh yeah, you're like, you don't have a shoulder socket or a labrum or a rotator cuff. And um yeah,
But a
so it's
really
been,
high pain tolerance is something that you do have.
Yeah,
yeah,
clearly.
I guess so, which it could be a good and a bad thing. Pain is your body trying to help you.
Mm,
And I've definitely had moments where I would say my pain tolerance has probably hurt me in the long run. But uh, yeah, that was the worst injury I think I've had. Actually, absolutely the worst injury I've had from a seizure. But it's also why not restricting movement is so important because your body has no signal to say this is unnatural. Relax. You're just
Hmm.
tense and you break your bones in half.
oh,
Oof. You're
yeah,
I've
that's
I've
happened
did
to Nathan,
Oh
right?
yeah, I'm getting the EBGBs. Yeah, I got a plate here and just, I originally dislocated my shoulder from falling off of a porch, and then like I don't even think I ever got hurt playing football. It was just like seizures.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
which is but because a lot of people, it's like we walk, we talk, we can do things, and it's like, is it a disability? People will question, and like, man,
hmm,
yes, you can be disabled from not having a shoulder literally on your socket and,
yeah,
breaking your face. Like these are major, major
hmm,
things. And I guess what we're trying to say to our hazers out there that are listening is if you're going up a ski lift, put on the damn arm bar, okay?
yeah,
Let's,
yeah. Yeah, my
no,
fiance always has his arm around me skiing now. And so that was what he was doing at the time that I had the seizure Friday.
mhm.
Uh, and he's screaming at the lifties, like, stop the lifts. Like, she's not gonna be able to snowboard off.
Oh, they
Everyone's
have a
freaking
the
out. They don't
lifties, the
know.
people that are those the people that operate the lifties?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
lifties. I guess that's the casual term for it.
Huh.
Lift
Yeah.
operators. And yeah, and then I my he had to sign a paper that said yes, they advised we go to the hospital, but no, we're not going, um, because he just knows
Yeah.
my needs and uh, but it's no, even medical professionals don't necessarily know how to handle it. Like my sister-in-law is a PT, and she had a guidebook for what to do. And one of the things that she volunteered to do is rewrite the guidebook on seizures, just because she's so close to me. And their guidebook, written by a medical professional, had said to immediately start giving someone CPR, and that is like insane to me. You're just going to completely break a bunch of bones in their body, versus trying to get them on their side a little bit so their airways are breathing. And I mean, a medical professional wrote that.
That is insane.
Yeah. So I was like, I
A
am so
long
happy
time
that you
ago or
volunteered.
something.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's yeah the number one reason that I was so interested in doing like this type of thing. The more I've talked about it, you sometimes you get the response where someone's like, "Oh my God, my dog has seizures," and then they feel really bad. I'm like, don't feel bad. It's good that you know something about epilepsy, even if it's in your dog. That doesn't offend me. But uh, yeah, the more you talk about it, it's so important. I get so many phone calls where someone's like, "Oh, I'm so happy we had that conversation. Someone randomly had a seizure, and I was the only one that knew what to do."
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, it's important. Yeah,
We're so happy to have you on, and thanks for coming on. And I already know just the content of this conversation is it's going to reach people. We had somebody reach us
Cute.
that listened to the Jared podcast too, while she had a stereo EEG, and she was just like it helped her get through. So epilepsy unfiltered. We'd love to have you back too. We want to updates. Well, how the wedding plan is going.
yeah,
I mean, it's just
absolutely.
such a relatable thing. Like Shannon was the first woman I met that like with the family and stuff, and as a man with epilepsy, it's just like there's different things that I can help speak from my experience, and then stuff that I just was like, hey, you need to talk to Shannon, for example, catamenial epilepsy, and what that really
Hmm.
means. So I am really excited to get this one scheduled and out the door, and it is really cool to hear your story, and thank you so much for having the courage and just to speak up uh, and out about it.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
guys for creating this platform. I know I just like
Mm,
word vomited stuff on on you guys, but
We love
uh,
that.
yeah, this is
And people
super
love to
super cool
hear
that you're
it,
doing this.
Anna. I mean, it's like I said earlier, it provides hope, an element of hope for other people to hear other people's stories, Oh
Yeah,
yeah, it's happened to
yeah,
me.
it's
I've been there. And look at you, like
hmm
you guys are still, you're working and you're doing stuff and having kids
yeah,
and getting married um and it's encouraging. And that
yeah.
part of it is encouraging for us too.
oh
So
yeah, totally.
Absolutely. My parents have gotten super involved too with the Epilepsy Foundation. My dad tried to stick a bell in my mouth, like a wooden handle, first time I had one, because he didn't know any
oh
better.
wow.
And they
Yeah.
realized with them having no education in it. And then, my mom's a teacher, so now every parent at school, their kid starts having seizures, they go to them. Um,
Oh good.
Again, yeah, just talking more about it, finding stories that are relatable is
We need
so
to we need to
important.
write we need to all get together, write the Hazy Not Crazy guide, galactic guide to the seizure handbook.
You say
Yeah, that
galactic
would be
guide. I
Yeah,
awesome.
love it.
what
Let's
was that
do
book? The
it.
Yeah,
Hitchhiker's Guide to
to
I
the
love
I'm
that.
galaxy.
drawing a blank. Yes, yeah.
Well, we'll do
Yeah.
that. We'll get that together. So my last
Uh,
question is, when do you guys have I mean, I know you just got engaged, but when do you have a date? Are you looking at any time?
Yeah. We're thinking fall 2024. Besides that, we have no
Oh,
idea.
Interesting.
awesome.
I totally was gonna think it would be a
Exciting.
winter month on a mountain.
Yeah. That's definitely a possibility, I think. We're gonna try to stay local in Colorado, and I am already overwhelmed by thinking about planning. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, 2024, and then my maid of honor, Alyssa, is pretty much the only two things we have planned besides being married at the end of the day.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, keep us
That's
up to
good.
date and we're gonna follow up.
Yes,
I mean,
Yeah.
definitely. Congratulations.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
thank you.
Looks like we
Did
lost
Shannon just
Shannon,
peace
but
out? Shannon
she
just
had
went bye-bye.
she was done with the conversation.
She was like, I'm out. Oh, she just
Yeah.
texted her battery died.
Oh,
Ink.
okay.
Oh, thank my battery died. Okay. Well, okay. Anna, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This was really cool. And I'll definitely let
Yeah, thank you.
Jared know we spoke. I know he's just an awesome guy. And yeah, we're gonna keep in touch. We want to follow up. Give the fiance a big shout out from the Hazers, you know.
Yeah,
And
I will for sure.
again, this is gonna, I'm sure, just get a lot of mileage and really inspire a young woman out there, you know, especially to see you in your position and be a successful athlete and then go on to just do awesome things is it's clutch. It's money.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on. It was really nice to meet you guys virtually.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, have a great rest of the day and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good.